podcast, A Penny for Your Thoughts with me, Steve Penny. Over the coming weeks, I'm going to be talking to some great people. I hope you enjoy listening in. Thank you. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another recording of A Penny for Your Thoughts with myself, Steve Penny. I'm sitting today talking to Jarrod Coburn, a gentleman I've worked with on a trust board in the past. So I'll just get Jarrod to give us a quick introduction, who he is and what he does at the moment. So over to you, Jarrod.
I run a law firm, and I'm also on a variety of governance boards. I live in Christchurch, Canterbury. Been here for most of my life, born here, grew up here and in Wellington. And what else do you want to know? Do you want to know a bit about
family life?
Papa?
Yep.
Yeah, well, I'm married to Erin. Erin is a family lawyer, and between her and I, we own a law firm called Portia, which is a small law firm that punches above its weight, focusing mostly on family litigation and some civil litigation as well. My family came to Aotearoa, New Zealand in and around the 1860s. So,
wow. Well, one of the first ships, near enough.
Just a little bit after the first ships, but certainly within that period of time between 1840 and 1877 when the Treaty of Waitangi was valid.
Yep.
So I feel quite a responsibility there from my tupuna to make sure the treaty is honoured, because
yep.
That's how we got entry into this country. My probably great-grandfather came from Wessex in the south east of Ireland. Mm-hmm. My mother's family came from Germany and Scotland.
We have that in common. Most of my family is Scottish.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Jarrod. You're obviously running a law firm at the moment, but you're not actually a lawyer. Is that correct?
Yep, that's correct.
So how come you're running a law firm?
Well, when I moved back down to Christchurch just after the earthquakes in mid-2012, I just finished a couple of big contracts with the government, and I was concerned about the safety of Wellington. I've just done some research into the likely outcomes of a major earthquake in Wellington, so it was on my mind. And when Christchurch struck, I thought, I'm going to move to Christchurch. The old saying is, everything that could fall down has fallen down, or been pulled down.
Yeah.
And I was just finishing my Masters and was really at a loose end.
What was your Masters in?
My Masters is in community governance and resilience.
Okay.
So Erin and I had been going out for a while, so I was only going to sort of move down here for a wee bit. Then I ended up sort of staying at her place, and then ended up not moving out, and ended up getting engaged, and ended up getting married.
Okay.
She was at a bit of a loose end because the government changed the rules around legal aid and around the family, the law around family,
yep.
The Care of Children Act.
Yep.
And we were concerned enough that we started a law firm in response to that, to ensure that people did get access to justice.
Good advice at a difficult time, I guess.
Very much. There were a lot of, you can imagine how many people fled the city without having the legal requirements in place. When you have a mother and a father and a child, or parents and a child, they are both guardians normally, and certain decisions have to be made together.
Yep.
You can't unilaterally decide, for example, to move a child to school, or that a child can no longer speak a certain language. It has to be something that's shared. So people fled the city, quite rightly,
yep.
Took the child with them, went to family, maybe up north somewhere, and it just left an enormous amount of need from people who stayed down here wanting to, have contact with their children again.
Yeah, okay. So that would have been a very altruistic approach, I think, to the business to start with, focusing on providing a service that was desperately needed by an area that has been devastated by one of the worst earthquakes that New Zealand's ever seen.
You make us sound like saints.
Oh, well, not necessarily saints, but certainly people trying to do the right thing, which I think is, is very important. That, that's part of my focus with my business is the same. Integrity only exists if you do the right thing when people aren't watching.
That's exactly right.
You know, and
100% right.
that's kind of the way I want to run my business, and it's probably one of the things that I've saw with you when we were working on the Canterbury Men's Centre board, that you've got quite a lot of integrity yourself and you want to do the right thing, and I think that's come across certainly in my interactions with you. So it's not surprising that your business is the same. So you mentioned that you'd done a couple of government contracts prior to starting the law firm. What were you actually doing for a career prior to Portia Law?
Well, I was working in management. I sort of fell into it from the hospitality sector. Mm-hmm. So immediately prior to moving to Christchurch, I had a contract with the Department of Corrections to rewrite their risk management framework for their organisation. So I spent 6 months doing that. At the same time, I was working for Fisheries, Ministry of Fisheries, in their sort of tactical operations centre, which was an absolutely fantastic job. That wasn't a management role. That was more of a, hands-on role. And, I did quite a bit of contract work here and there when I was in Wellington. I worked for Wellington City Council as a senior advisor for communities.
Yep.
And I worked for the Royal New Zealand Plunket Society as their development manager.
Okay.
As well.
So it's been a lot of governance type roles.
It's certainly been moving towards that. I mean, it's something I'm fascinated about. I'm not just fascinated about the concept of good governance. I'm fascinated that so much of New Zealand's social fabric relies on the goodwill of non-profit organisations and non-governmental organisations, yet there is such a lack of good governance in this country.
Well, there's a lack of, there's only really one place you can go for training. That's the IOD.
Institute of Directors, yeah.
And it's really expensive.
It is.
And I think that is partly the reason for the issues with governance. But I think the other thing is that people don't even think to go and get training, that they have an organisation and they create a board of people they like, and then they get on and do things without really understanding the risks they're taking.
Yes, I agree. Look, in my career of management, I consider myself a professional manager. I'm a fellow of the Australasian Institute of Managers and Leaders. I really get upset by how easy it is for a person to slap manager into their job title. Or employ somebody in a role that has manager in the title without any qualification or knowledge. You wouldn't see a chartered engineer, without an engineering qualification and etc. You wouldn't see a lawyer without a practicing certificate.
Yep.
And the oversight of the New Zealand Law Society.
Yeah.
But
you have managers everywhere.
And then on top of that, which makes it even worse, is that people, as you say, they'll get together with friends, very in good intention, and by all means, I celebrate that people do that. In this country, we still are able to do that. It's a very important part of our social fabric. Mm-hmm. But they will employ a manager who might or might not have management experience, but they'll sit around as governors of an organisation with absolutely no clue about what actually governance is. Mm. Many people go through the motions of having a meeting every month. There's usually not much oversight going on. Normally the managers in these not-for-profits, smaller not-for-profits, are overwhelmed because they're doing the work of the board as well as the work on their work as well.
Yep.
And have very little support. So you've hit my bugbear, my pain point here.
It's something that you are right that we need those organisations for a lot of what goes on in every society. I think that the non-government, not-for-profits do a lot of good work. And I guess it's about making sure you have a positive impact when you're interacting with them and make them better in some small way. I think that's certainly what we tried to do with Canterbury Men's Centre, and it's what I'm trying to do at the moment with the MAPS board that I'm on, and I'm sure you're doing the same with the ones you're on. You just look at what they're doing and you identify where you think the risks are, and you let people know, and you try and mitigate those risks. Yeah, and that's kind of that's probably as much as you can do in a lot of instances.
Well, I've just gone through a very interesting process with Ferrymead Heritage Park, which it has been around for about 60 years, and it's such an unusual place because it was built organically. It was almost like, you've got a couple of groups there. One builds a railway, one builds a tramway, somebody builds an aircraft hangar, sticks an aircraft in it, somebody else comes along and starts moving some old buildings in, and next minute you've got this amazing heritage precinct that's basically a collection of the history of Christchurch, which in itself is a very unique city. And I was elected onto the board last year and started a process along with another trustee to redevelop the whole park from the top down, so from governance downwards. In the past, when the park has had fresh ideas and new things, it's been coming from operations, from the bottom up.
Yeah.
And that doesn't always work, because if you don't have a strong governance structure in place, then you miss out on the benefits of strategic planning, strategic risk management, etc.
Okay, that's good. That is good. So just focusing on your professional life, what would you say has been the biggest challenges that you've faced, and how did you overcome them?
I think the biggest challenges have been doubting myself.
Imposter syndrome. All people who are good at their jobs tend to suffer with imposter syndrome.
Maybe that's just a natural defence against the Dunning-Kruger effect. Who knows? But I'm a person who thinks, I take on an enormous amount of data before I make a decision, and particularly when I'm thinking strategically. Yeah. So there have been definite times in my life where I should have acted instead of kept gathering data and thinking. So my supervisor at university called it paralysis by information. And
I think that can sometimes, if it's a big decision that has significant impact, sometimes that can be the case, that you're terrified of making a decision that's the wrong one. So you don't make any decision. And one of the things I've found myself with my depression is that that's what would happen to me, that I'd only see bad outcomes. So I wouldn't want to make a decision because all of them were going to be bad. And that's me catastrophizing the situation. It wasn't the reality, but it was what my mind was telling me was going to happen. And that, when you're running a business, you've got to make a decision. It doesn't matter if it's a bad decision. You've just got to make a decision. Things have got to keep moving. And that took me a long time to get my head around that, and accepting that sometimes you'll make a decision that's not optimum, but you can always correct it afterwards, because it's never final. There's always an opportunity to change things, certainly in business life, maybe not so much in personal life, but in business life, there's always an opportunity to change things if you get more information or if something changes. Yes. So, that paralysis by indecision is something I think a lot of people face, to be honest.
And I think, as you say, as you get on in years, you learn from it. You get more confident.
Do I look that old?
I've certainly got a lot more confident in that you don't learn unless you make mistakes. Yeah. And, you need to avoid being reckless, but at the same time, you have to avoid being stagnant.
Yes.
Again, I'll go back to governance in this country. A lot of the problems we have are people who are not willing to take a chance or to adapt to change, or who are clinging on to the hope that things can be the same all
forever.
The time.
Yeah. I think that's true in a lot of different work streams in New Zealand, that there's people that only want to do things the way they've always done them, and change is terrifying and is always wrong and bad. And I think that holds New Zealand back. But then the other side of it is you've got so much innovation in this country. The whole "we can fix anything with a bit of number 4 wire" is alive and well, and it's doing things that New Zealand is then punching way above its weight, like the things with the jetpacks and other things that we're doing in this country, and the space exploration stuff that we're starting to do. And you look at the Weta Workshop and what that was doing in terms of CGI, they're way above anything anywhere else is doing. And so you've kind of got a real dichotomy in the society where you've got people who don't want to do anything adventurous and people who are doing insanely adventurous things. And there's kind of no middle ground.
Well, And the resolution to that thing, I think, Steve, is a little bit more understanding of some of the theories around decision-making, management, governance and things like that. I mean, I still use the works of Michael Porter from Harvard from the 90s. Porter's 5 Forces is just a real basic business model that sits in my head when I think about innovation, environmental change, marketing change, and things like that. And these other, very, very useful models. Stafford Beer's viable systems model, looking at autopoietic organisations and how organisations can sustain themselves moving forward. These are fairly simple and straightforward models that you don't need to go right into the calculus to really understand the basics of. Mm-hmm. And it just takes people to have an inquiring mind and just be willing to think outside the square a little bit.
Yeah. And also I think the other thing that sometimes holds New Zealand back is if it hasn't been done before, then it's not good enough. We have to do it here, and it has to be done in the way we do things. And I think, I've come across that in my professional career in New Zealand, that experience gained overseas has nowhere near as much value as experience gained in New Zealand. And I think that can sometimes hold New Zealand back as well, because there's a lot of good stuff happening around the world.
Absolutely.
And we tend to try and reinvent the wheel a lot.
We absolutely do. And I guess that brings it back a little bit to Te Tiriti o Waitangi, in that there are certain things in New Zealand, there are certain ways we do things, kaupapa, that can add a lot to what you learn from international experience. But having said that, the way some of the ideas and some of the culturally influenced ideas of Māori are actually very similar to some of the culturally influenced ideas of other non-European
other
places.
indigenous peoples in Australia and America and places,
And you worked in the Middle East, so you understand the importance of hospitality in the Middle East, and it's fascinating reading, the instructions on how to greet a person and make sure they have some water and etc.
Yeah.
When you meet a person in the desert, for example, or you bring them into your tent. Well, there's so many parallels to Māori, tikanga Māori. It's fascinating. So,
well, I do think there used to be the same parallels with European culture, but I've been sort of thinking about why European culture is so much less in tune with the environment around it than the indigenous people seem to be. And I think it comes down to population density. There's a lot of people in European countries and they are resource hungry. So they stopped thinking about blending with the environment and started thinking about owning the environment. And you look at indigenous people, the population densities in America, in New Zealand, in Australia and other places where there's strong indigenous peoples, the population density isn't as high. You're not all massed together in big cities. And I think that's part of the reason why we've lost that connection, that we don't see ourselves as being part of the environment. We see ourselves as owners of it and we can do what we like with it. And I think that, that looks, it's my idea. It could be complete rubbish.
Yeah, I agree
but,
with you,
there's that hunger for resources is what drives the way that we treat everything around us, I think.
That's, you hit the nail on the head, and right back to our Scottish forebear Adam Smith in his concept of the invisible hand, when it comes to capitalism. When you make a decision, if you're making a decision based on greed, and I'm not saying people who make decisions that have a monetary end point are greedy. I'm saying that greed is the end point. It's different from when you make a decision based on family.
Yep.
You might buy your loved one a very expensive gift, but you wouldn't necessarily put that same amount of money into a charity box.
Yep.
Or you might not spend that much money buying a product for yourself, but you might buy it for your mum or dad, or children. I find that a very interesting concept. It's almost like the most basic concept in the world is that we make decisions all the time, and we make decisions based on an end motivation. And you mentioned right at the very start, you said to me, you're very altruistic.
Yeah.
I have I don't believe in altruism.
Okay. You're an altruistic atheist.
I don't. I believe in the. I believe in the golden rule. I believe in treating people
With respect.
and with respect. I believe in a lot of the Māoritanga. The importance of mana and the welcoming of manuhiri. Those are very. I think those are embedded in many.
Well, honesty, integrity, respect for others, for yourself.
Which is the same across the world in many nations. But
there's so few people that seem to believe in it.
Well,
no, that's not true. That's not true. There's you see the bad examples all the time.
But don't you think that if people didn't have that end goal of money, that if that was taken out of the picture, people would be a lot kinder to other people?
I would say in Western culture for sure. Yes. I think that they do say that money's the root of all evil, and I think it's, you can translate that into any kind of possession, really. It drives a different kind of approach to people. If all you're interested in is how much can I get for me, then you act very differently to what's the best way that I can deliver the service I offer and be paid for it. But do it in a way that is contributing to society rather than taking from society. There's very different perspectives. If it's, I can do a really bad job, but I can do lots of really bad jobs and get paid money for doing them. That's fine. That's what I'll do. Or I would do fewer jobs, but I'll do them really well and I'll get paid well for doing them. One of them, you're going to make a lot of money, but you're not going to get a very good reputation, high turnover of staff and all the other things. The other one, you may not make as much money, but you'd probably be more sustainable as a business.
Indeed. And that's again. Your insights are rolling like the tide today, Steve.
I thought about it a lot recently.
We went through the 70s and 80s, the greed is good, Wall Street sort of concept, and there's still many people in America, I suppose. I mean, maybe New York. I won't single out all Americans. Some people in New Zealand, who perhaps feel that that's the driving point. And I think at some point in life they will find out that that was not the road that they necessarily should travel to find happiness. But there's many others who are just satisfied at doing the best they can, want to actively help other people. And again, going back to this altruism, one of the really interesting papers I read a long time ago that really influenced me talked about levels of altruism. Mm-hmm. So the ultimate altruism is basically that you sacrifice everything for some person who you don't know, and you don't even know if your sacrifice did any good. That's the ultimate altruism. And that is bollocks, because nobody does that.
That's insane.
That is literally the definition of insanity.
Yeah.
But then the worst form of altruism, but still altruism, is when you get into your car and put your seatbelt on because you don't want to get a ticket. So you're still doing a good because, of course, it's protecting you if you have an accident, and it saves the, it saves
health
a lot
system and everything else.
But it's completely selfish.
Yeah.
And Richard Dawkins obviously very famously talked about the selfish gene and how we are all inbuilt with a selfish motivation.
Survival of the species is a very individual thing.
Absolutely.
It's when you look at it from a sort of a biological perspective, you want the strongest of the species to survive, because that gives the rest of the species the best chance of survival. So that's really selfish. That is, who's the strongest in this particular species, that's the one we want to survive. And, whether that strength is their ability to find food, or whether that strength is their physical strength, or whether that strength is their leadership, whatever it may be, that's where the focus is. And it is a very selfish way of looking at society. But it's true across the animal kingdom as well.
Of course it is. And that selfishness from a species, it depends on what you choose. Remember I said before about choosing greed or choosing family or whatever?
Yeah.
If you look at, I'm not an expert in this, but apes, the ape gorillas, right?
Yep.
Somewhere along the line, gorillas probably chose strength, not that they're violent creatures or anything, but chose strength as their
evolutionary trait.
Yeah. Somewhere, humans chose brains, because that's really what sets us apart. I mean, you put us out in the wild with no weapons, and we wouldn't survive.
Yeah. I think that's not quite true, because you say we've got the brain, so we'd work out fairly quickly that we need to protect ourselves.
Okay, sure.
But we wouldn't survive if we didn't have the brain. If we had just our physicality and not the intelligence that some of us allegedly have got, then we wouldn't survive very long. You're right. It's the brain that makes the difference on us, and it's the same for some other high-level mammalians as well. That you look at the strategies they develop, you look at what orcas do when they're fishing for seals, and there's a lot of thought that goes into what they do.
Crows are amazing.
Terrifying and amazing, and ravens and all those other. I mean, that's the thing, that where intelligence is seen as a major importance, it really does stand out. That you can see that intelligence is being used in a way that benefits the species enormously. Apart from with us, where we use that intelligence for our own gains, not for our species, and we kind of think we've got the arrogance to think that we're killing the planet, when in fact all we're doing is killing ourselves.
That's true. The planet's going to mourn us.
It'll be happy without us, and it won't take long. I mean, what you've got to do is look at the videos that were going around after the lockdowns in COVID, how quickly nature took over.
Yes, absolutely.
And you're seeing that the change to what was happening in the oceans with the whales being able to communicate, and you just think we're really not doing ourselves any favours. That's my hobby horse. Right, I just want to go back a bit more on track of the questions, although it's been a very interesting conversation. What would you say would be your proudest achievement so far in your life, whether it's personal or professional?
I'm not a prideful person, although just about anybody who knows me would argue that, but I'm really not.
Prideful would suggest that you're bragging about it. I'm just saying, if there's something that you've achieved that you think is a good thing, whether it's a personal thing that you've done, or whether it's setting up your business and the service that offers, whatever it may be, there's nothing wrong with being proud of an achievement.
The achievement I think I'm most proud of is not me; it's my staff. Part of my job at Portia is to onboard new graduate lawyers and train them to the point where they can actually work in a law firm. Much the same as engineers, I imagine, and many other professions. Despite 5 years or 6 years of training, when a person has finally finished their qualification and may apply to be a lawyer, they are not at all ready to be a lawyer. They have so many gaps in their knowledge, it's just unbelievable.
They know the basics of what a lawyer is, but they don't necessarily know how to employ that knowledge in a way that works.
Well, that's a very, very positive and uplifting estimate, I'm afraid.
Well, it's the same for engineers. Like mechanical engineering at Canterbury is mechanic engineering. It's building engines. That's not what I do. So when we get a mechanical engineer, they know a bit about thermodynamics, and that's about it. And there is so much more that we do. They've got a very short period of time in their degree when they look at building services, which is what we do, that covers off heating, ventilation, air conditioning, cooling, plumbing and drainage, God knows how many other things, all of which are their own specialism. And they get a couple of weeks, maybe half a semester on those subjects. And they're the ones I want. And yet they've got a 4-year degree. And that half of one semester is only bit that's of any use.
I'll give you an example.
I feel your pain.
There is a piece of legislation called the Lawyers and Conveyancers Act. Mm-hmm. This is the Act of Parliament that enables the practice of law in New Zealand. I don't think I have met a graduate from any university in New Zealand who's graduated in law and gone through professional studies who has read that piece of legislation. To me, the very first day I started in the law firm, because I had to learn all about law, I read the Act. I just read the whole Act. I just sat and read it. And I've read it so many times since then, because that is the playbook. It's the instruction manual for, running a law firm.
Yeah.
It's all in there. They've never heard of the High Court rules or the District Court rules or the Family Court rules. These are the rules of the court. It's like playing Monopoly without having read the rules of Monopoly, except 1,000,000 times more complex.
Yeah.
might have heard a little bit about what family law is, but that's just a whole. I mean, I don't even train them about family law. That Erin does that when they move. They spend about 3 months with me and then move into the litigation team. And probably for the next year, they get trained on the legislation itself. Now, this is not a criticism of those young people because they don't know what they don't know. It's sort of a little bit of criticism about the academics because I think, but there again, they are also very directed by legislation about what they can teach and what they have to teach. It's just a challenge, as you say. You have the same challenges in engineering as well. But
yes, I mean, I think there is an opportunity for the universities to work closer with industry, though, and there is some instances where that happens. I've been involved for a couple of years prior to COVID, not since COVID, unfortunately, but prior to COVID, working with a cohort of students as an external professional, teaching them about day-to-day life running a business and what engineering really means when you get out and do the job. And, I found that really fulfilling to do. And I think there needs to be a lot more of that. I think that my view would be you look at what happens with the vet course that my daughter's doing at the moment. The last year of the vet course is all out in the industry working with vets. We should do the same with engineering. What they get is 800 hours, which is 20 weeks. No, not even that. It's 400 hours, 10 weeks of industry experience. That's not enough. If you want to have an engineer that finishes their qualification and can do the job, then they should get a full year of that. And they should be a 5-year degree, and the last year should be working with different consultancies or different engineering firms, getting experience of what being an engineer is. But that doesn't happen because that would mean another year at university and there'd be more cost and all the rest of it. But, I think that there's a gap there that needs to be filled because businesses like mine and every other business, really, you take somebody on and at the moment, for the first probably 2 years, they cost you money.
That's right.
They don't earn anything. And then, as you say, they then think, I can get more money if I go over there. So I've had my 2 years of training. Thanks, Steve, I'm off.
So the original question was, what am I most proud of? And I'm most proud of my staff because they start in a incredibly challenging environment. Like, you don't know from day to day if you're going to get a call and a person thanks you for the work you've done or threatens to kill you. We've had to shut down our office because of threats of people coming there to shoot everybody.
Oh, my God. Okay.
We've had clients murdered. We deal with the most extreme ends of family violence.
Wow.
And we've done this for the last 11 years. Our staff, who are very young, are incredibly resilient.
Yeah.
They support each other. The culture of the organisation's really, really one of strength. We have a shared vision. And, I look at what I was like when I was 22, 23, even up to 30.
Yeah. And
I had none of the skills that these people have. They are wise beyond their years, and they're dealing with, they're 24 years old, and they're dealing with people who are 50 who can't agree about what's going to happen to their child, and squibbling about all sorts of stuff, and the wee child's there suffering, through it all. And it's like one of my staff who are barely adults having to sort this out for them, having to stand up in front of judges who, from day to day, you just never know what attitude is going to come into the courtroom. Dealing with a system that is completely intractable when it comes to timetabling and having to turn up. Sometimes they're in 2 different courtrooms almost at the same time, and it's too bad. Run. So
it's not very helpful, is it?
No, and so this environment, and they do it with a smile on their face and a sense of humour and a sense of ethics that I just can't, I didn't get until I was in my 40s.
It sounds very much like family law could be described as almost vocational. It's something you've got to be passionate about in order to do it.
Yeah, it's a calling. Yeah. But it's like, as Erin says, it's like Shortland Street every day. It's very interesting.
I'm not sure that's a good thing. Can you just maybe talk to me about something that you've learnt that really changed your worldview?
When I was about 29, I was a volunteer paramedic in Wellington, and I got called to a incidence of fitting, like an epileptic fit.
Yeah.
Early in the morning, with the full-time officer, and it was a young boy, 19 years old, and I still remember his name. I still remember everything about that.
Yeah.
It was my first time I'd ever been exposed to death.
Wow. Okay.
I'd been 6 months in the service, and I hadn't seen a dead person because I was up working on the Kapiti Coast. So,
right.
You didn't really get death very much up there. It was sort of quiet.
Yeah.
But I was also incredibly lucky or unlucky not to have that. Normally, most people in their first week get it. So, and the fact that he was young, the fact that we couldn't save him for many reasons, it really made me think about life and, I suppose, the big picture of why are we here, what my limitations are, what I can and cannot do. It took me a long time to forgive myself because I blamed myself for his death, even though it completely wasn't my fault. The pathologist, I followed up with the pathologist, and he said no, the kid was basically dead. But there's nothing you could have done.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's like a real hole inside me around that, and I know I learned things from it. Could I give you the wisdom of that? I don't think so. All I could say is pain, and not just my pain, but the pain of his father.
Yeah.
I
think that losing a child, I think, is one of the worst kinds of grief that there is, because you shouldn't outlive your children ever. And you witnessing the death of a young man like that, I can understand why that would have a big impact. One of the things that I've found, myself, my wife and I, we lost in childbirth, and not the same thing at all. Didn't get to meet the child, but one of the things that I realised a long time afterwards is that I'd never really properly grieved for that process, and my therapist said to me, the thing that you're missing is you're not grieving the life, you're grieving the lost potential. What could they have achieved? What would they have been? All those dreams you had about what your kid was going to do snuffed out. And that, unless you're sort of aware of it, that's something you don't know how to deal with. And I think when you see a young person struck down like that, it's going to have quite a fundamental impact on you. And for me, it would be focusing on a lot more on what do I actually want to achieve with my life, live every day and enjoy every minute of every day, because you don't know what's going to happen. Look at my mum, she's 79 nearly, had a good long life, but she died very suddenly. And, if that happens, you want to make sure up to that point you've done as much as you wanted to do, because there's no do-over. Once you're gone, you're gone. I think, I'm not a religious person. I don't believe in a life after death. I think you live your life, you die, and then somebody else comes along, and you never are back again. So I think if you don't enjoy every moment whilst you're here, or at least try to, then you're doing something wrong.
No, I agree with that. The potential, what you said, the potential is absolutely spot on. Absolutely spot on. So don't know if I answered that question.
Oh, I think you did. I think you did. It's something that had a big impact on you. So that's what I was looking for. That's good. Just changing things, hopefully to a bit more positive things now, because we've been kind of on a bit of a down. Who would you say was your biggest influence in your life?
Well, two. I have to absolutely say Erin, my wife, has just changed me so much in a good way.
Yeah.
And so I cannot let that question pass without acknowledging her. But
absolutely.
In the spirit of the question, I would say Socrates.
Okay.
Because he was a bit of a dick. Annoyed the hell out of people.
Yeah.
it just had this insane quest for knowledge, and not just knowledge but virtue. Just so wanted to understand the way he wanted to understand people's motivations, and I love that. And whether he did exist or whether Plato created him as a prosaic sort of device.
Well, there's some suggestion that Socrates wasn't a real person.
Well, exactly. I mean,
it's a bit like William Shakespeare.
Well, indeed, absolutely. But whether or not, I mean, it actually doesn't matter, because something interesting that perhaps many people don't know is that Socrates, he never wrote anything down. Everything we know of Socrates was written by Plato, who used Socrates as his method of exposition in his writing.
His muse, almost.
Yeah, so Socrates would be walking down the road and speaking to some guy, and he'd say, "Hey, why do you think this is important?" And then they'd have this conversation about it, and they'd be very witty conversations, or really clever conversations. The Socratic approach to learning is something I'm really fascinated about.
How would you describe the Socratic approach to learning?
It's where one person who thinks they know more than another person annoys the hell out of the other person until that other person gives up and finally learns something.
Okay.
I think that's how I describe it.
That's one way of describing it.
If you read, I think it's book 6 of Plato's Republic, he talks about the allegory of the cave, which is about taking somebody who has, taking the viewpoint that we all know only what we see projected in front of us. We're not born with the truth. We are only born with what we are told is the truth.
Yep.
And, if you were lucky to be released out of that world and helped into the light to see the real world, then that's a painful process. It takes time, it's confusing, and it's scary. That's the process of learning and the process of accepting that what you thought was real was not.
Yep.
Then when you're in the light, when you have the light of knowledge shining on you, it's wonderful. But if you return back to that place where you started, to the people who you were there with, then you will find that you will be ridiculed because you are enlightened, and they are still working upon the assumptions that they've been taught. So that's the learning process, the Socratic learning process.
Yep. It could almost be an allegory about my life. having gone back to where I was born and grew up the last 2 weeks, it feels very familiar.
Okay, I get that.
Okay, moving swiftly on. What do you do outside of work to recharge your batteries, to relax and enjoy yourself?
Yeah, not the usual stuff, I can tell you that right now.
Play with trains.
Play trains. Well, we don't play with trains because these are real trains, and railways are a serious thing. So playing is not done. Mm-hmm. So I'm a member of a society called Diesel Traction Group, and it's probably the most interesting society in New Zealand because it's a railway. It's a registered railway with New Zealand Transport Authority. It buys or acquires old diesel electric mainline railway locomotives and restores them, and then leases them to people who want to operate heritage train trips.
Yep.
So we don't operate the railway ourselves, but we still have to be a railway. Mm-hmm. We're based at Ferrymead and also up at Weka Pass Railway up in Waipara.
Okay.
And we have a great collection of English electric locomotives that come from the great industrial areas of the old country. 2 of them are unique in the world.
Oh, wow. Okay.
They and indeed, all of them are very precious, items. These things cost like we've got one at the moment, the very, very first ever mainline diesel electric locomotive, not just the first class, but the first of its class, that arrived in New Zealand in 53, 54. That is a DF class. It's going to cost probably about $1 million over the next 10 years to restore.
Wow.
We do that. So I do that. I'm a trustee, as I said before, for Ferrymead Heritage Park, and we're working through the redevelopment of the park at the moment. I'm the professional secretary for the Heritage Technical Committee, which is a committee of chartered engineers.
But I was asking what you do to relax.
Yeah, well, no, this is what I really do. So that's it's a paid position, paid for by KiwiRail, but I work for the Federation of Rail Organisations, and we meet 4 times a year to approve rolling stock and locomotives that run on the network. So we do the safety approvals, we look at the engineering changes, we see that they've been restored correctly, etc. So. Not really much else. Watch quite a bit of Netflix with my lovely wife. Help her. No, I don't help her in the garden. I watch her in the garden and support her in the garden. I do
make sure she's got a cold drink to hand in the summer.
Yeah, I did bring her some water the other day. That's true, because I noticed she didn't have water. She's pretty self-sufficient though, which is good. And just basically spend time with her as much as I possibly can.
Okay, sounds really good. Okay, time travelling time. If you could go back to see your 20-year-old self and give your 20-year-old self a piece of advice, what would it be?
It would definitely be, don't get married the first time. That wasn't a smart thing.
We didn't even talk about that.
No, lovely woman, but we were both far too young. I would say, I don't know. No, I wouldn't have listened to myself. That's the problem. Like who does?
Well, when you're 20, you're bulletproof, aren't you?
Yeah, I'd be like, oh my God, do I look like that when I'm 53? What?
What have I done to myself?
Stop eating KFC. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what I'd say, mate. I mean, what would you say?
What would I say? I'd actually give myself a piece of advice that I think I mostly live by anyway, which is never say no to an opportunity.
Oh, yeah. No, that's a good piece of advice.
Because you learn a lot, whatever it is, whether it's I'm never doing that again, or whether it's that was fantastic, I want to do more of that. Certainly in my professional life, I've tried not to say no to opportunity. I wouldn't have gone to the Middle East. I wouldn't have gone to New Zealand. I wouldn't have started my own business. All of those things that I've done, changing jobs when I changed jobs, there was an opportunity and I took it. If I hadn't done those things, I wouldn't be who I am and where I am now. And I think that's probably the best piece of advice I would give to anybody. And when I'm talking to graduates and others, I say the same to them. When an opportunity comes along, take it, because you just don't know where it's going to lead.
It's a good advice. I think I would say to myself, Steve, appreciate the talents you have and work those talents and use those talents. Don't squander them. Yeah. It took me a long time to understand what I was good at in life.
Yeah.
A long time. And if I'd done some thinking earlier in life, I could have.
I think we'd all could benefit from doing some thinking earlier in life. The most boring answer, but also the most frequent answer I've had to that question is put some money in your pension. And that, again, very true.
Very true, but not something I would even now think about.
Yeah. No. So, changing things around a bit as well, if you could meet with some person who's either alive or dead, like a hero of yours, whether they're a real person or a character in a book or alive or dead, who would it be?
Yeah. I think my grandfather, on my father's side. He died when I was 2.5.
Yeah.
And I have very brief memories of him. He came back from the war, World War II.
Yeah.
And he basically drank himself to death. It took 20 years or so. As I think many people did.
It's a pretty traumatic part of people's lives, I think.
I remember the first time I went to look at his gravestone in the RSA cemetery, and it said he was, you always have these fascinations as a child with people who've been to war, and you think everyone's a hero. And so my grandfather came back from World War II, a changed man, as many did, and spent the next 30 years basically drinking himself to death.
Yeah.
Died at age 61 of cirrhosis of the liver. When I first went to his gravestone, I was a young fella, and I saw that he was in the Postal Corps. He served in the Postal Corps in North Africa. And I'm ashamed to say that I was disappointed, because you want to think that your granddad was some sort of hero, flew hurricanes or was in the SAS or something like that. My granddad was in the Postal Corps. And then I found out later in life that actually what his job was in the Postal Corps. The Postal Corps were responsible for recovering and identifying bodies.
Yeah.
And that's what he did. It's probably the worst possible job you could have in a war zone.
Yeah.
And
particularly in a war zone as large as World War II.
And as hot as North Africa. And so he had stuff. My dad had a box of stuff that was my granddad's, and my dad talked a little bit, but I know that Harry, his name was, he came back. He didn't talk to Dad or anybody very much. I mean, he didn't. And he suffered. He had his demons. He built... he did amazing things. He built one of the largest licensed restaurants in the South Island, which was just north of Kaiapoi, a restaurant called Pine Haven, which is where I sort of grew up, and I suppose that's where I got my interest in hospitality. But I just feel that if I could just have a night with him to let him just let out some of that stuff. That would be lovely.
That strangely fairly similar. My dad's mum, my paternal grandmother, passed away when my dad was about 17, I think. So I never met her. And my dad's dad, William, was a very strong-willed, very dour Scottishman. But by all accounts, my grandmother had control of him. So I'd really like to meet her to find out how this quite slight, very attractive young lady got control of a very dour and strong-willed Scotsman. My grandfather was... my maternal grandfather was in the Second World War as well, and I did actually talk to him. He died when I was about 16, so I did get to spend some time talking to him. He was pretty reluctant to talk about his experiences, but he did tell me some stuff, and it stayed with me that that we just don't appreciate the sacrifices that generation made.
No,
really, we don't understand the deprivations that they went through, the pain that they went through.
Not just the people who went to war, either the people who stayed
behind as well. Yeah,
that's true.
Yeah, my granddad was married for 2 months before he was serving, and I think 6 months into his first tour of duty, he was shot down and taken prisoner. So he was with his wife for 2 months, my grandmother for 2 months, and then was a prisoner for 3.5 years.
We forget about, and maybe it's something I'd like to sort of say right now too, is there's a war going on in the Ukraine at the moment that everybody seems to have forgotten about.
Yes.
And those people are going through the same levels of deprivation.
There's also one going on in the Middle East.
In the Middle East as well, absolutely.
Yep.
And
the only difference is
Israel,
it's 4 countries involved and not 40.
There's been wars in Syria and Turkey and all over the place, and we are so lucky to be here in this country, isolated from the rest of the world. We need to sometimes just touch on that and just be very grateful.
There's a lot of bad stuff going on, and that's why you need to focus on the good stuff, I think, because you can get into a very downward spiral mindset if you just focus on the bad stuff that's going on. But that's not to say you shouldn't recognise that there is bad stuff going on and there's bad people in the world doing bad things. We need to correct that. I think one of the things that has been said to me in the past people that haven't got children said, I didn't want to bring a child into a world like this. But somebody countered that, and I can't remember who it was that said that. And said, but you could bring in the child that changes things. You could bring in the child that makes the world a better place.
That's true.
And if you refuse to do that, then you're adding to the negativity because you're saying that there's no way it could ever be any better. And it's kind of...
Erin and I didn't want to bring a child into this world because we couldn't be bothered. Staying up all night woven bloody nose.
It's so hard. It's so hard having kids.
It's my selfishness. Oh, and it's enjoyable. Let me tell you, having no children. Oh, it's a dream. 20-year-old Jarrod, if you're listening to this sometime in the future, those decisions about not having children, the best decisions you've made.
Fair enough. Okay, I've got a couple of other questions I want to ask before we call this to a close. So, is there somewhere that you'd really like to travel to that you've not been to?
So many places.
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell you where I never want to go is Antarctica.
Okay.
Because there's very few museums down there, not a great wine industry.
Yeah.
I would love to go to South America. Erin's very keen. She convinced me. She said there's red wine and steak.
There is, Argentina in particular.
Yeah. And I know she's very keen on that as well. I would love to take a trip around the Mediterranean up to the Baltic in a Cunard Line cruise ship.
Mm-hmm.
It would be joyous. Want to go back to England one day and back to Ireland as well. But I know it's all changed since I was last there. It's,
Yeah. Apart from where I grew up is exactly the same as when I left it 30 years ago.
Where was that?
A place called Wickford in Essex.
Right.
It's quite scary, to be honest. You walk around and you think, nothing has ever changed in this place. And it's not a good thing. It really isn't. But, it's small town UK.
Vienna at New Year's Eve when I think it's in Vienna. They play the Radetzky March every New Year's Eve. I'd love to be there for that. Yeah.
Europe is where I want to spend most of my time, I think, if I get the opportunity to do so.
Well, when you're over there, if I come over, then I expect to bed somewhere.
Oh, yeah. Or a nice glass of red wine.
In your villa. Overlooking the...
Let's see if we get there. One other question I had, actually, is there a performer, doesn't matter what kind of performer, that you'd really love to see live that you haven't?
Yo-Yo Ma.
Okay.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Very big on classical music.
Yeah.
My friend Eugene Albulescu, who I went to school with, he's Romanian, and he went on to have a wonderful career in music in New Zealand.
Yeah.
I've never seen him play live. Roger Whittaker.
Okay. Yeah.
I'd love to see the Bolshoi Ballet.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, but I'm lucky. I remember going to see Red Hot Chili Peppers down at concert at East Christchurch. Probably 20 years ago now.
Mm-hmm.
My God, that was a great concert.
Imagine it was.
Amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. One last question, I think. Yeah, one last question. What are you reading at the moment? Reading any books at the moment?
I am. I'm reading a few books. I'm reading a book called House of Leaves, which is the most challenging book I have ever read in my life.
Okay.
I can't remember the name of the author. It starts with Z. But House of Leaves. It's a work of art because the book itself has... the experience of reading the book is part of the journey.
Okay.
You know how, I don't know if you've read the Dark Tower series by Stephen King. Well, you know how he made you, in one of the books, it was so repetitive, and he just made you go again and again and again and again through the same thing, and slightly different things changed every single time. Most people give up at that point. You know, it's a well-known sort of theme about this, but Stephen King was using his writing skills to viscerally put you through what the characters were going through in the book. Well, this Book of Leaves, it's written in such a great way because you'll be reading and there'll be a footnote. And so you obviously you'll stop reading and have a look at the footnote. And the footnote might go on for 4 pages.
Oh, wow.
And in the footnote, there might be a reference to the back of the chapter. So you have to stop and go to the back of the chapter, and and you'll spend about an hour reading all of this stuff, which is the backstory to whatever's happening at the moment or about that particular character. Get back to the original position you were reading, and then have to get back a page and read everything again, because now you've got this perspective that you didn't have before. It's pretty mind-blowing.
Yes.
You can't get an audiobook of it because you just couldn't be able to put it in an audiobook. It's impossible to do that. And it's a very simple story of a house that is longer on the inside than it is on the outside. And I've been reading it for 4 years. I've got about halfway through the book.
Wow.
It scares the hell out of me. I don't really want to know what happens in the end because it's just so deeply psychological. It's just unbelievable.
Yeah. Okay.
So
sounds very challenging.
Yeah. And there's another book I'm reading by Will Durant. Will Durant was an American with his wife Allison. He was a Pulitzer Prize winning historian. He wrote a history of civilization. Started in about 1930, finished it in about 1960 something.
Right.
Reading some of his earlier work, talking about the Orient and the Middle East prior to World War II, you are reading this without the colour of World War II. It's fascinating. Mm-hmm. It's just a very clean perspective of history that you don't get nowadays.
Yeah.
And then post-World War II, he was writing about the Reformation and about Martin Luther, and that in itself is fascinating. So it's a 54-hour audio book just for that one chapter. Yeah.
Oh, my God.
It's so interesting.
That's a lot of reading. Okay, I think that's all my questions. Is there anything else you would like to share with us?
Well, I just want to say to your listeners that by now, I guess that those who have never met you will have a perspective of you. You know, you've got a big heart, you've got a ready wit, you've got a thirst for and a curiosity for knowledge. Mm-hmm. And I don't know what's going to happen with this podcast, you know, with this collection of oral history that you've basically put together. But I hope one day, 100 years' time or so, it gets discovered and people listen to it and go, oh, is that what life was really like?
Well, I don't know where it's going to go, but what I believe is that everybody has a story, and giving people a chance to tell their story is good for them and good for everybody else. You know, it allows us to know a bit more about one another, and hopefully by knowing a bit more about one another, we can be a bit more understanding and considerate towards one another. True. Because you don't know what's going on behind somebody's eyes. And if you don't ask, you'll never find out. And, I think it's important that as a society, we spend more time being less selfish and, try and be part of society rather than separate from it. And, I think we're very isolationist. Certainly the Western culture is very isolationist, and we should stop that, because all it does is cause conflict. And it's no good for anybody, really. Anyway, thank you very much, Jarrod. It's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you for listening to my podcast, A Penny for Your Thoughts, with me, Steve Penny. I hope you've enjoyed today's conversation, and I look forward to sharing my next conversation with you in the future. Thank you.